Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank. Miles, introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, I'm Miles. I'm a neuroscientist currently working at the University of Minnesota. Originally, as some of you may hear, I'm from the Netherlands, so I'm not born in the US, but as I said, I'm a neuroscientist, do research on brains, but maybe we will talk about that, maybe we don't, so we will see.
First of all, your accent or your voice just is amazing.
Thank you.
Second, why did you choose neuroscience? Like, why did you choose specifically to study about the brain? Because I know a lot of people choose to try and stay out of their thoughts, or they try and be more in the moment. But I find that, like, I don't know if you have a calm mind, or man, even if your mind's even uneasy, just the way that it works is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating. To be honest, I kind of stumbled into it. I never really had a plan of studying neuroscience. Um, when I went to university, I started with something called computational engineering science. And then I figured out that I'm not very good at math. So that didn't really work out. And then I was kind of like I had an off year and I really didn't know what to do. But I kind of wanted to study because, you get better job, you get a better job later. And then I went to some open days of the different universities, just check out what they can offer. And then I stumbled into psychology. And that kind of took me immediately because it was, there was a lecture about, it started off by saying, don't think of a pink elephant. And then it was fascinating because the first thing you do is think of a pink elephant, although somebody told you to not do that. And I was like, man, that's crazy. Why am I like that? And then I just stumbled into it. And then, basically started studying psychology. And from the first day, I loved it. And
what do you find your mind gets attracted to the most out of it, though? Like for me, I went to school for chemical dependency to try and understand addiction more. Then I eventually took some more psychology classes and got more into the mental health aspect to it. And for me, like people want to explore space. I rather explore our oceans, but I much rather explore the human mind because it's something that's so close to us, yet we understand so very little compared to the grand scheme of what really can make this thing tick. I mean, I've talked to people who explore in the realm of psychedelics, which to me, I just think it's a plant's defense mechanism to make your brain react to a certain thing so it saves the life of the plant so you don't eat it all. But there's just so many like moments in time, I would say, where if something happens, now it could just be a random butterfly flying across the street. Like for me, for instance, I was driving my car, I watched a butterfly just miss a car, and I was in a down point in my life, and I was like, that's us all floating through life, just missing that car or that butterfly. But then I was like, I had a come to God moment. But then I was like, if it went the other way around where the butterfly was just splattered, I would have had a completely different, reaction from it. But my brain,
Right.
like, you start to notice that through life, your brain in some of your most critical moments will try and find ways to bring you back to base level or try and, reset your harmony in a way. And I think a lot of people neglect the basic functions or the most beautiful aspects of things because there's too much going on in the brain. And that's where I start to get down the rabbit hole of why I kind of enjoy it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you can look at it from different perspectives. You can look at really like from the behavioral perspective, which was more a psychologist thing to do, or as what I then later did is go more into the biology of, so we have different neurons in the brain, we have cells in the brain, and together they create this entire reality that surrounds us. Or I mean, the reality is obviously there, but the way we experience it, that's what's created by the brain. And I'm like, that's kind of a lot of that. That's a lot for this kind of, I mean, it's not that small, but it's not a huge part of the body, the brain. And still that small thing creates everything. So that's kind of cool.
And it's even harder when you're trying to diagnose an issue or some type of psychological problem. Not maybe behavioral is kind of easier to diagnose, especially if you're looking at like facial features or if you're looking at certain distinguishes when it comes to maybe it could tell somebody's angry if their eyebrows point down a certain way and they
Right.
have that anime kind of like anger look to them.
Right.
But then there's things where it comes to like neurological things. If you have a neurological bowel issue, a certain part of your stomach isn't working because maybe you have one of your nerves or something is pinched in your body, or you might have have a certain connection blockage that comes into your brain that can't send a signal to your intestines to get everything moving functionally. And that's when it starts to get like very scary. Like I've taken an MRI for digestive issues before, and they're like, you might have neurological bowel. I'm like, well, how do you fix that? They're like, well, there's a million something neurons inside of you, and we have to find the one that's not working properly. I'm like, that's damn near impossible. It's like, yeah. And I'm like, even with our technology that we have now, it's very hard to diagnose the issue. And that's when you kind of start looking and seeing how many different methods people use to be able to come to, maybe it's a placebo effect, maybe it's a nocebo effect. I have no clue, but there's people that have studied the realms of marijuana. There are people that have studied doing yoga every single day and finding some type of way to be able to fix the problem that they're in. I mean, if you're functioning with a digestive issue, maybe it's taking a CBD, or maybe it's switching up your diet. Maybe it's just a subtle difference where you think you're doing a lot and you're really not doing much, but your brain reacts to it differently, where it can subconsciously or some type of way trick you into thinking, hey, you fixed the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so what you refer to, the placebo effect, is definitely crazy, and it's actually for scientists quite a bad thing, because we want to understand what the brain is actually doing. But then, of course, there is the placebo effect, which kind of hides everything else that could be going on, which we, for example, do with medication or whatever. So, you take a drug and then all of a sudden somebody gets better. And then as a scientist, you think, okay, we found something in the brain there, but then you find that, no, it's just a placebo. And it's just so hard. It makes it so hard to research.
What do you think, like, if I'm going to ask you, like, maybe through your science or through your research, any skeptical ideas that you've kind of developed yourself? For instance, I've talked to plenty of historians where you're seeing all these people that would call themselves philosophers, and I think a lot of people on Twitter probably go by that monogram as well too. And I start to wonder if it's just what happens if someone, when they were a baby, told them that everything that they said was like the smartest thing they've ever heard. Then you spend your whole life hearing that type of kind of stimulant or that type of reaction to the things that you would say. Would your thoughts change? Would your brain start reacting differently, trying to reach longer or grasp farther distances to try and find something that gets uttered out of your mouth as being intelligent? Because now you have all this over kind of consumption of feeling like you're extraordinary or you're extra intelligent compared to others. And that is a theory of mine, obviously, that I'm just sitting here speculating on. But I start to look at, like, how many thoughts are you thinking that necessarily might not be your own? Through media, through influences that you've seen. We're all a part of our environment, but things that you see on social media or things that you hear or things that can take your brain and start thinking completely different. Now, you can examine this easily from my first episode to where I'm at now. I don't think like any normal person should at my age, only on a concept of I've seen too many perspectives now where I can't even devise my own opinion on things. So I don't know if that's necessarily good, might necessarily be bad, but it's a change. And that comes from influences of many other different people, which is why I'm so pro conversation.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. We get influenced all the time, and also on our YouTube channel, we have a few episodes on that, and it's there are a lot of things you don't even think about. Like there are obvious things, right? Commercials, somebody wants to sell something to you. It's obvious that we kind of get influenced by that, but there are so many subtle things where we get influenced. One stupid example is when somebody yawns, we are more likely to yawn as well. And it's just because our brain has this inbuilt function of being social. And, if somebody else yawns and you yawn as well, that shows some relationship, some empathy there. And it's not something you can do about it. And it's also something you're most of the time not aware of. And those are just very mundane things. There are a lot of things, as you said, like if you grow up in a certain household, of course you will, depending on what you hear over your life, that will totally determine on where you end up. It's no coincidence that people who have parents that are highly educated often go themselves into university, even though they may not be above average smart. It's just, well, first of all, they probably have the money to do it, but second of all, they also just get kind of not pushed into it, but they automatically end up there because it's just in their mind. It's like, yeah, that's the path of us, our family, of everything. And if you have parents that maybe not so wealthy, that maybe not so well educated, it's a lot harder to get into higher education. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible,
Yeah.
but just on average, on the statistics you see, it's more rare.
Do you think those are based on older studies though, rather than newer ones, when we look at the fact that maybe a degree is not really what's deemed as successful anymore? Or do you think that's a dumbing of the I guess the populational effort or mindset of success? Like success is a Twitch streamer now, but how do you explain if two wealthy parents or two educated parents have a kid that is a dropout and kind of like a burnout kid, but the kid still becomes wealthy? Only on the concept of they're able to manipulate the system, much as there was an example of a guy who sent an invoice for his electric company to Amazon. He sent it to Netflix. He sent it to all these major corporations. And I think the charge was like 800 something thousand dollars or close to $1 million. And they just paid it. Now, my issue also with that is that I'm not mad at a guy for cheating the system and finding a way to scam a big company, but I am mad at the fact that that company has that much money to where they don't even notice $1 million being missing. But that's a sense of intelligence just based in a different environment, I would say. I mean, there's educational standards when it comes to intelligence, but I think society now deems more appropriate or more successful as just having maybe a social status that's very high up, or maybe some type of influence to be able to manipulate the minds of other peoples is very good for business aspects.
Right. Yeah, no, it's definitely combination between intelligence, but like you have, when we say intelligence, we typically mean IQ, but there's also something called EQ, which is the I'm not even sure what it stands for, but it has to do with emotional coefficient or something like that. Just how well you are in reading people, how well you are in understanding emotional situations, and that is as important, maybe even way more important for understand or getting success in life. So if you can, read somebody very well, people skills, it's kind of like people skills. If you have people skills, you get way further. The person who has 20 friends in high positions will get more easily into a high position themselves, rather than somebody who is just intelligent but is a hermit and always stays at home.
But doesn't that fascinate you, how like this is like a very expansive time for just thinking in general? Like if you look at like back in the day, if we talk about IQ or whatever, or we talk about intelligence, would have been read a book or get a bunch of knowledge into your head. But then if we go over to people skills, for instance, now people skills could be being a very good talker, being able to, talk to groups of people, or only being able to talk to individual people. Or maybe it's a skill that you end up developing where you find people that are so good at talking where they kind of, I would say my best example would be like someone from Chicago or someone from like a very like hard kind of city, because their voice is usually very booming. It's very loud. It's very authoritative. So then if you even try talking to them, it would be hard to debate this person because they would talk over you in such a way. It would be like watching Donald Trump go against somebody. You're like, this dude's just fucking controlling everything. It's different, but that's a set of people skills as well. It's also a set of leadership skills as well, but also leadership skills is also giving everyone a value opinion as well too, depending on where you're located and how a person thinks. This is when I start to go into like, there's everybody, like you can start to see everybody's different perspectives. And like from talking to my buddy who's a flat earther or someone else who's whatever, something crazy conspiracy wise, I start to understand that now that's that person's reality, but trying to take down your own mental fortitude to step into that person's reality to understand that. Now we can sit here and talk basis in science, but I much rather see where your mind goes on things to see an example of better explanation of who you are as well too, a better, deeper level connection. Now we could sit here and talk textbook, sure, but it's a deeper conversation when you're able to just be like, hey man, what about aliens? What is this type of thing that my mind keeps thinking? These skeptical ideas, because then it lets down your guard to understand that there's an open platform of communication, which I think is highly important because I think that's where general discourse and communication evolves from.
Right. No, absolutely. I just, you will, so you mentioned a few things there. Let me break that down a little bit. So, you said about people having those people skills, and really very convincing, and that's as you say, it depends a little bit on the situation where you are, but that's indeed something that's, if you have that skill, and it's of course something you can develop. That's great.
Yeah. Car salesman.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And that I'm not even sure that is necessarily related to intelligence. I mean, it might be, I don't know, but it doesn't really matter.
It's like
But
cunningness, but then where does cunningness? It's like when you're playing like a Skyrim game or Oblivion, and they give you all these skill traits, and you're like, I got my magic up. Well, which magic did you get up? It's like, what do you mean which magic? There's like 9 realms of magic, man. It's like that's kind
right.
of like intelligence. Is it book smarts? Is it street smarts? Is it being able to manipulate? Is it being able to convince? Is it being able to just be crafty? I mean, in situations where a person that might spend all day being by themselves or being alone might have the best mental fortitude of thoughts, where even trying to engage with other people is just a hindrance to their own intelligence. Or the other way around, where they might just be a crazy person no one likes and they have to isolate themselves. I have no clue.
Right. And that's also why I think that intelligence, as we measure it nowadays in science, is just not a good measure, because there's so much more towards it. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a problem. Now, the second thing you were mentioning is about, if you have a certain mindset, let's be it the flat earther, or let's be it me, who comes way more from a scientific perspective, then that is your new reality, or something like that, you said. And that's really interesting, because if you look on Twitter, if somebody disagrees with somebody else, they always start fighting, right? And I think it's so dumb, because, as you say, it's so important to have the conversation, because if somebody has that reality, whether it be the one thing or the other, if you don't, like, if you start insulting them or just saying that everything they are saying is bullshit, then of course they're going to be insulted, because it's you attack their reality. You're not attacking, just for you. When somebody argues with somebody else, you're just trying to show that their argument is wrong. But from their perspective, it's like, you're not attacking their argument, you're attacking their entire viewpoint of life, their entire reality. And that's why there are so many discussions on Twitter or somewhere else that just blow up instantly.
I also think it's more of like artificial communication. Like if we look from like a psychology perspective, talking about like when you would have a hard day or something and you need a sense of venting or sense of that you're important, you would console in a friend or a family member who would tell you it's okay. Then you would feel recharged and you'd feel better about everything that you've been fighting within your head. And you'd go off, and maybe next week or next month or something, you might need another talk like that again. But then you see someone put up a Facebook post and it's like, I fucking hate my life. Now you'll get a bunch of people saying, we all love you, or you'll get one jackass that'll comment, kill yourself. Now,
Right.
out of all that, you see the likes on your posts. Then every day you put up that post. And then let's say you do it 7 days in a row, and every single day it's increased by 1 or 2 likes. Then that 7th day you put it up on a Sunday when everyone's at church or everyone's out working or something. Then nobody likes it. You're like, do people still care about me? And you start to
Right.
realize like this empathy, or this, it's been replaced with not really a sense of apathy, but more of a sense of like, it's an atrophied version of empathy that's just artificial, and it doesn't have the same impact as a natural stimulating conversation. Me chatting back and forth with you on a text message thing doesn't have the same impact as me and you being in the same whatever, even if it's a
Right.
Zoom call. But then the Zoom call could evolve to, if we got a beer together, it would be a completely different stimulation that would enter our brains, and we'd feel a different chemical dump that would cause a sense of either feeling good, or if it turned into an argument, would just turn into a giant like heated thing where our adrenaline starts pumping. And then it's like, that's, you see that happen with Twitter, where it's like people feel like, I think it's because the miscontext or the sense of not being able to get a tone of voice out of the words that are being described as, you read the words and then your brain tries to assimilate them into a category where it's heard those before. If you ever call me Robert, I've only been yelled at and called Robert. Nobody says that to me. It's always Robbie. So if I hear the word Robert, then my back of my neck hairs will stand up, because that's somebody yelling at me usually. So I've assimilated in my brain that slot. And I'm like, what? Why does everyone love space so much when this is way more fascinating? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's kind of the idea why we started YouTube channel. Like because we're always like, people like space. Well, they must like the brain as well. So, but yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And we make associations every day of our life. Our brain, people don't realize this. Before we started the chat, you talked about Andrew Huberman, who is very good at explaining neuroscience. And he talks a lot about neuroplasticity, so the brain changing. And we always think that when you learn something, very specifically, then your brain is changing because of neuroplasticity. The neurons are connecting more. The thing is, what people don't realize is your brain is changing all the time. Like from now to back 10 minutes ago, my brain has made, I don't know how many more connections. The connections that were there have been strengthened. Our brain is like, it's more like water than like fluid water than it is like a rigid structure. It's changing all the time. So what you say, like we make associations all the time, and if you make all the time the same associations, in your case with your name Robert, then if you hear that multiple times, then those connections will be strengthened so much that over time it has a meaning that it has to nobody else.
Well, if you examine the grander scale of that, is that your whole entire mental fortitude is like a sandcastle. You build it up to be this luxurious thing. And then one day, not knowing when that day is going to be, a wave is going to knock it all down and you'll have to restart. Like that's with a lot of people. That's where we start leading into like the realm of schizophrenia and the things of that sort. Now, I think it's good to speculate. I love it when people gives me like some idea, some far-fetched thing. Like UFO Twitter gets a little bit pissed off at me because I'm kind of like, is it aliens or is it like government tech? And they are all like, they'll refuse to believe that it's government tech. They think it's 100% another existential being. Maybe it is. I don't know. But that's when it becomes a little bit toxic, is when you start to get angry because you feel like that you've not being heard, which I can understand. But it's also like, it's good to speculate and not have any definitive answers in life. I mean, Aristotle's the one who said to admit that you know everything is to admit that you know nothing. And it's 100% true. There's no definitive answers in life. And I think that's important, because any speculation, whether the earth is flat, whether the moon landing's real, fake, Buzz Aldrin's an alien, it doesn't matter. Trying to understand a person's perspective and really getting an insight on how they're thinking of things can help you develop a better consciousness within yourself of understanding how or more about people, which leads to better communication in the long run.
Absolutely. And it's funny that the more you are convinced of something, so the less flexible you are in your thoughts, the more angry you get about it. Because if you're always open to different topics and different discussions, why would you get angry? Because you know your viewpoint, but your viewpoint can change. So why would you get angry? But it's typical of people who have a very strong opinion on something, and that opinion cannot be changed, that those are the people who get angry. And it's typically also those people who know the least about the topic. It's the people who are open to new discussions. They have heard so many things that they often have way more knowledge about the topic than others do.
Well, it's kind of like probably why I get super interested into politics is because I've read MK Ultra, which really got me interested into the government projects. And I'm like, you start noticing the mind manipulation, like how so many people could be invested in something that has nothing to do with them. And you're like, why? And it's like, because their reality has been kind of shown a whole completely one-sided thing. And I think that's what I get a little upset about, is because it's so hard, especially with the pandemic. How many people are living off the fear narrative? Like there are people that'll be standing all by themselves, just wearing a mask. And it's like, you're 100 feet away from everybody, but they're that scared because they think that there might be this impending thing. You know what I mean? I start to look at like, are you spending more minutes being worried than spending more minutes living in the moment of the thing that you're trying to enjoy, which is this factor of life that could be gone literally in a second?
Yeah, but at the same time, I would also say, if then the mask thing gives you the comfort of whether that thought of COVID is real or not, is that doesn't really matter. But if wearing the mask gives you the comfort, then why not do it? I mean, again, this is a discussion about people who don't want to wear a mask. They tell nobody should wear a mask, and people who wear a mask, everybody should wear a mask. I'm like, dude, wear a mask. I don't care. Like,
yeah, wear for comfortability, or if they tell you to, for sure. I've seen people in my town that are like deathly afraid, like that still won't leave their house thinking that it's going to kill them. And
but even then, if they then do it and stay at home, and then they are comfortable with that, then
yeah,
it's fine with them. And then how that entire situation came about, there's nothing you can do about that anyway, right? So it's not like you will change their mind with any of their arguments, because they, as I said, they are very strongly of that opinion. So if they think the entire world is on fire and don't want to go out, and they feel more comfortable at home, well, then let them stay at home.
That's when I start like speculating on like, there's got to be something else wrong there too. Because my buddy loves wearing a mask, and I'm not against it, but I always ask him like, why do you wear it so much? He goes, dude, my teeth are fucked up. And I was like, So you wear a mask because you don't want people to see your mouth? He's like, yeah, this was a perfect thing to happen in this world. And I'm like, a lot of people feel differently about the pandemic, but it's his perspective of like, now he can always wear one. And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. I mean, if you enjoy it, it looks cool. He's got a cool like Borderlands style one that looks like like one of those rogue bandits or something. I'm like, it's awesome. But I don't know. I start to look at things a little bit differently when you start examining life, like trying to take instances that we miss on an everyday basis because we've opened up the door to technology, which has gone from a luxury to kind of a reliance in a way. And I start to look at like because if something you open up or invite the door for something to come in, you're replacing it with something. And I think that's something that we're starting to realize now is kind of our lack of critical thinking and a lack of understanding compared to maybe like people say wars happen all the time. So understanding was never there. Yeah, but it was more at the forefront. Like the social dilemma that came out when people found out that the government and all this was tracking and selling their data and stuff, then people got over it. It's like our attention spans are so quick now where we always are on to a next trend. And I think that's because there's so much stuff out there that you're always hopping on a different thing. And I'm like, our attention spans on old Nickelodeon commercials used to be close to 5 minutes long when they would do a whole like claymation style intro. Then it went down to 5 seconds. You can look this up on YouTube where it just goes, they used to play a 3-minute song. And then it goes at the ending of where it's at today, it goes, Nick. And then it's over. It's over. I'm like, what happened? They're like, attention spans, man, they got shorter. I was like, that happened in 10 years. Like, oh my God, where's the world going to?
Well, I will challenge you on that because I will make a video about that attention spans that necessarily get shorter. It's just, but it's related to the other thing you're saying, that there's just way more out there. And if something doesn't grab your attention immediately, you can hop onto something else. I think that's a little bit different than attention span. People always use the word attention span. Span just refers to the ability to pay attention.
Yeah, but what about a kid that is also on a cell phone listening to a podcast while playing Minecraft while also on his computer doing something completely different? That's a form of multitasking, but that would also be a sense of attention span, that one thing is not capable of grabbing his attention anymore.
Well, yes, it doesn't grab his attention, but it's not the attention span. It's not like the span refers to the ability, and that our ability didn't decrease is just shown by the fact that we have, what's it called, esports, where people like concentrate on one game for 24 hours or whatever. People still have the ability to do it. It's just that it's because in most situations in our life with commercials and everything, if you don't like a commercial, you zap to something different. Or on YouTube, if a video doesn't entertain you, you go to the next one because there are 10 million out there. So just because our attention is shorter doesn't mean our attention span is shorter.
Well, if you put any of those esports people into Farming Simulator where you're just based on one game, you don't really see them doing much more unless they're doing something off to the side as well too. The only Farming Simulator video tutorials or reaction videos I've seen is when someone's also streaming live and also looking at the comments and being able to react to those people. I mean, that's what video games is going to technically now eventually evolving into, which is also playing live, streaming, and also reacting to people's comments that get put in and getting money from it as well too. It's now gone from just paying attention to the game to now adding another feature in there as well too. It's why you look at Grand Theft Auto, you can drive your car, hit people, dodge things. There's a million different things in this one aspect of the game that your brain is paying attention to. Necessarily, you might not even be thinking about it. Subconsciously, you're reacting, much like when you drive your car. Why is every single person when they drive their car really, really like angry when they get into like an incident or if they get into like someone cuts them off in traffic? It's because subconsciously your brain is at a level 10 because subconsciously you're thinking about at any moment a wrong thing could happen and that person doing something or cutting in front of you can cause your life to end. You're not necessarily thinking about it consciously, but subconsciously you're thinking about it. And that's from Andrew Huberman.
Right, but yeah, but still, that doesn't. I would fully agree with you that attention is shifting way more. Like attention shifts happen way more, and that's just because in the environment we live in. That to me doesn't explain necessarily that we don't have the ability to. Because okay, esports, don't take esports. Take a neurosurgeon. Take somebody who has to focus on doing surgery on a brain for 6 hours. We still have the ability. The ability isn't gone. That makes no sense. The ability is gone. But as I said, I do fully agree with you that in the world we live in, everything's faster. Everything is hopping all the time. So I think we both fully agree with each other. It's just that I use a different word for it.
Okay. Because I was just thinking, because now you got me speculating, if we look at a neurosurgeon, for instance, would that be an adrenaline event though? Because I feel like that's a great time to focus, because it gets like tunnel vision is an adrenaline focused event, where if you're working on someone's brain or you're doing surgery, you're just have someone open on the table. That's your main point of focus, because at any moment you could slip up if you're not fully paying attention and end somebody's life. But compared to like, I don't know, tweeting something, you could be listening to music, you could be walking, you could be driving and tweeting. People do that now too.
Right, but that's the thing. That's exactly what I mean. We still have the ability, whether it be through adrenaline or whatever, it's still there. It's just that it just doesn't happen because there are so many other factors around it.
Kind of like a neglected asset, I would say.
Right. I mean, go back 100 years. There was no television. There might have been a radio. Let's say they didn't have a radio. You didn't have anything to do. You were just sitting out there looking into the sun. Of course, your attention wouldn't shift because there was just no ability to shift.
Well, that's all they knew too. It's kind of like once Adam and Eve or whatever, they tasted the apple. There's no going back after that. It's kind of like when you smoke your first cigarette. There's no like, I've never smoked a cigarette again. No, you've smoked a cigarette, depending if you kept on going afterwards or if you stopped right there. I try my best to relax and sit outside and just soak up some sun, but I have to have like a podcast playing, or I have to be, something's got to be playing in my ears, because just sitting there, even as beautiful as the sound of earth is, it's just I have ADHD, so I got to be going on something.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. But as I said, I think it's just the way I define it that may be a little bit different. But I think we are in agreement.
I think, yeah. I mean, I agree with you on the factor of maybe a different word would be better. Maybe something like, I don't know, some task efficiency or something. Seems like it's multiple tasks, even though you could be linked into the same thing, thinking about the same thing.
Yeah, I would just call it attention shifting, which happens now way more than before. So there's a lot more attention shifting, but it doesn't mean that the ability to, because you could even argue, if you're shifting your attention all the time, you're still paying attention to all these different things, right? Like sequentially, yes, but it's not like, oh, now that there is no point where you are just not paying attention and just fully relaxing. Actually, you would even say to shift your attention all the time would require even more attention span, because I see span as how long in a row can you attend, and that doesn't necessarily need to be on one thing. You just, how long can you focus your mind?
But would it lower the percentage of how much you're actually concentrating on the individual object if one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking about that. I was like, yeah, because like at my work, I'm at working front desk at a gym. If I'm doing a transaction, it's very hard to talk to someone and then also do the transaction as well too, to be able to count the money in your head. It seems like everything's at like 15 or 20 or 25%.
Right. No, absolutely. And multitasking is people sometimes say you can't multitask. I wouldn't fully agree with that, because it depends a little bit on how hard the tasks are. For example, you can walk and talk at the same time. If you see walking as a task and talking as a task, then that's multitasking. But yeah, if you have to divide dividing attention, which is a little bit different from shifting attention, because shifting attention, you hop from one thing to another, whereas dividing attention, you try to split your attention. That is very difficult, and our brain has a hard time to do it, because our focus of attention is kind of one spot. And actually, if you look into the brain physiology, you can actually see that within the visual tract, that we cannot focus on one thing at a time. Maybe an interesting story is, it's totally unrelated, but I just want to
go ahead. That's kind of the point of the show.
For example, an eagle, so a bird, an eagle has 2 points where it focuses attention. So when it flies, it has 1 point rightly in front of it, but it has a second point of attention. It's called the fovea. It's where the eye is sees the most clear. It has a second point, so it can also look down while flying forward, so it can find prey or whatever. So it has 2 foveas, which means it has 2 points it can pay attention to at the same time. And that's something we don't have. We only have one focus of attention. We only have one fovea in our eye and in our brain.
That's fascinating.
Yes, it's cool, right?
And so like if you increase the complexity of a task, it makes it more difficult to be able to perform the multiple tasks
Yes.
effectively.
Yes. Yes, and there are a lot of studies that even show like your performance drops by 50%. So, you know, if you could first memorize 7 items, if you're doing something at the same time, you can only remember like 3 items or so.
And do you think it's easier to expend mental energy than it is to expend physical energy?
Wow. Okay, I have to think about that one.
Because my example is like I mentioned before, is I'm an insomniac. So when
Yes.
I mentioned it to a sleep scientist, they said that, yeah, it can age you like 30 years mentally because you're not getting the hours of sleep that you need. But when I was asking him, I was like, well, then how do I fix it? He goes, necessarily, you're just not burning off the proper amount of energy that you need to do. And to his point, if I work out twice, if I do a 3-hour cardio session in the morning and a 3-hour cardio session at night, I'm dead tired and I will sleep like a baby. But I do have an unnatural REM cycle, which is that if I fall asleep for 20 minutes, it feels like I sleep 8 years and I get the most intense dreams I've ever experienced.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So coming back to you, I would say they're linked, mental and physical activity, because that's what you say, right? Because if you like your thoughts will calm down as well if you have more physical activity. I think physical activity is way easier to control. It's something which we have clear control. If you go to the gym and you know you've done that, whereas mental expenditure, you don't really know when you put in a lot of mental effort into something. Of course, you will know when you're studying something that you put in, but it's really hard to give that a number, right? So,
or when you get done with this podcast, you'd be like, damn it, like, I know it's first thing in the morning, but I'm already a little bit spent. It's because it's a mental exchange, because that's what conversation does as well, too.
right. No, absolutely. And in that sense, yeah, I would say that it is something where what people often don't realize, and what I think doesn't get a lot of attention, that mental effort can be very exhausting. And that's why I'm also a proponent of particularly here in the US, there's this working culture of just working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Whereas in Europe, where I come from, we are trying to, it's still 40-hour week, but we're trying to shift towards a more 30-hour week thing where you only work 6 hours a day. Because if you work less hours, but you can focus on those less hours, you get way more work done, because you don't have to spread your mental effort over a longer time. You can just put it all together and just get it out. And then I think that's way more efficient.
Well, yeah, if like work was designed that it was just you got to leave whenever your work was complete. If you got paid
Right.
more by commission rather than hourly, like to say if you have a
Right.
certain amount of time to finish this project, need to be done by this date, there'd be people that would study the first couple, whatever months or ever out of the year that they have to do this project, work their hardest at it, then get it done, and then they can just do whatever they want for the rest of the time. And that's kind of like more of an incentivization to do this thing. But every day is kind of like a daily task. For instance, let's take the
Right.
post office. A lot of times, like, I don't know if you remember this, but there was like going postal. There was that shooting at mail. That was an actual thing that happened. And what I would think, it's kind of a Seinfeld joke, but Jerry Seinfeld goes, it's because the mail never stops. It's a
Right.
task, and the task is never completed. The satisfaction of doing something is to know that it's going to end. For instance, if you go and cut your lawn, you know that when you get done, your lawn's going to look nice. You know, if you build something or build a shed or something, or you could buy a shed. You still get the shed, but you have more satisfaction when you build it and you have that sense of accomplishment within yourself. Now, with the mail, it just never stops. So every day you're walking into the same thing over and over and over again, which gets this nagging process, which they think might lead to why people snap all the time.
Right. No, I totally agree. And I can totally attest to that, because in research, it's the same thing. You would think that once your research study is done, it's done, but it's not. You just already up to the next one. It's always thinking. Like I cannot shut my brain down in the weekend at all. Like I'm always going. So yeah, that's definitely something that is a problem. But then still, it would help if we could somehow. I mean, of course, I understand for some jobs that's not possible, and maybe I'm biased as well. But if we can keep work hours a little bit more limited and then just spread it over more people, which would first of all decrease unemployment rate. And second of all, it would, the people who are employed, at least mentally a little bit more fit, because they don't have to like spend 10 hours in a boring office.
Yeah, even though I have like more of a psychology understanding, I'm not pro mental health days, only because the reason why you need a mental health day is because the life or the week that you've just had has been so terrible. So then I'm more about easing your week so you won't need that day where you just need to sleep all day to recuperate. Because so many people spend their days off just relaxing or getting drunk or doing something that's not really, I would say, in fulfillment of their life. And I think during the pandemic, a lot of people kind of woke up to the fact of like, am I that, like, all this 30 years I put into this work and it all just got lost? What do I want to do where every step I'm going to take is going to be in the right pursuit of the thing I want to do with the rest of my life? And I think that's important things you need to focus on, but that's so hard to do when you're working a shitty job 9 hours and you come home and all you want to do is eat and watch Netflix. You're not, there's no incentivization or there's no wantingness to go and expand your mind farther when it's already so drained by the time you get home, because physical will make you feel tired, but mental will also make you feel tired. But it's just weird how, as much as they are different, they're also super similar as well too.
Right. No, I'm fully in agreement with you. So I don't even have anything to add.
I do want to get to the sleep paralysis thing though.
Okay, cool. Let's go sleep paralysis. Awesome.
Tell me about
I
it.
have it for 10 years and it sucks.
I have it for 10 years. Tell me about it. When did you know you had it? Because I've only had sleep paralysis, I think, once. And that was because I think somebody woke me up while I was sleepwalking, and my whole mind just, like, it was like Doctor Strange universe flipped all my furniture around my whole entire house. Like my door, instead of being to the bottom left, was over here behind me. And it was just this whole entire shift where I couldn't even move my arms or my legs or anything.
Okay, so you had vestibular motor sleep paralysis. Already throwing in a technical term in there, but no, when did I figure it out? Well, probably 10 years ago, and it happened, and I kind of like, this was kind of scary. And though the first one wasn't necessarily scary. So you have different kinds of sleep paralysis, and the one that you experience is not super common. The one that's most common is called an intruder sleep paralysis hallucination, where you're sleeping, you can't move, but then somebody or something is coming into your house or room or whatever, and then you would want to flee or attack or whatever, but you can't because you're just stuck. People sometimes think of a thief coming in, or a ghost or whatever. It could be anything. In my case, in the first experience I had, it was just a little bird. So it wasn't really scary, but it was like, why is this bird on next to my bed, and why can I not move to push it away?
Wait,
it was
so
really weird.
You're saying that your brain is constructing something, and then like kind of like a reality, or kind of like this false kind of thing. It's not really there. There's no thief there. Like kind of like shadowy figure syndrome, where you can see shadowy figures moving in the corner. But this is more of a constructed, it looks more realistic object. So your brain is just distorting itself in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also called a hallucination, not a dream, which is interesting because typically when we talk about sleep, we talk about dreams, right?
Yeah.
But it's a hallucination, so it's a construction of something real. That's also why most people, and what you say is as well, what your hand says as well, is that when you have a sleep paralysis, you are in your room. You're not somewhere. Because sometimes in dreams you're like anywhere, you're in space, you're in wherever, but you actually are in your room, right? You experience the room around you. You think you are lying in your own bed in the position that you are, and that has kind of that realism factor, which makes it so scary.
That's fucking nuts. Because I heard someone talk about being abducted by aliens, and the aliens came into his room and took him when he was a child. Now, could that just be a form of sleep paralysis? Because I've also heard a buddy of mine, he's a famous comedian, his name is Steve Cantwell. I've mentioned him a couple of times before, but he has the best drug story I've ever heard. He took salvia and spent 8 years in a drug trip, living a whole nother life where his brain, like, you ever see My Name is Earl?
No.
Well, the guy goes into a coma and his brain like creates this fake, like WandaVision,
Mm.
like she's in this
Right.
distorted thing. That's what his thing did. But his whole thing was he smoked this salvia, sunk into the floor, and then woke up coming out of water. And then all these people that he never met before grabbing him on a boat and saying, "We got to take you to the doctor. You just got your bell rung." The doctor telling him that he has a form of memory loss. He's like, I know I'm in a drug trip. And he's walking around opening up the drawers, and all the prescription pads have writing on it. Like his brain
Mm.
assimilated this whole thing. He got a job at an apple orchard, raised his cable, like got an upgraded cable package after his promotion. He explained this trip that was 8 years, but it was only
Mm.
45 seconds in reality. And I'm like, what is that? What is that in our brains? That's nuts. That's insane.
Yeah, that's crazy. Absolutely. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, coming back to your first question, the alien abduction. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, if anybody had that experience and thinks it's real, like, I don't want to like argue against it. But there is a lot of evidence that alien abduction stories come from sleep paralysis, because out of body experiences are very much related to sleep paralysis. It's related to this so-called vestibular motor hallucination within sleep paralysis, where you feel that your body position isn't correct, and there is some evidence that it is related to regions in the brain that have something to do with balance and with what's it called, the vestibular system, so that the vestibular system is just kind of confused, where you feel like in either a very weird position, as you described it, where everything is upside down, or you are feeling in a really weird position, or that you actually have an out of body experience where you see yourself in kind of a 3D version, and that's kind of like the more mundane version of what then can later go into an alien abduction story. Yes.
I think the alien abduction stories, just to not piss off UFO Twitter, they're valid too. I mean, it's just so hard because there's a lot of evidence saying that some of these UFOs that people see actually might be some type of weather hallucination. We've done so
Right.
much to the climate and changed its whole kind of makeup in general that there might be some type of chemical or some type of thing that's reacting to our brains a little bit differently, much like psychedelics reacting differently to people's minds and these different experiences that people have. That's just nuts, man. Because I know what the hypnic jerk is. I know what that is. I know what I
Yes.
mean. I've studied into sleep a lot just because being an insomniac, I'm like, what the hell am I not doing properly? That's not letting me get this type of thing. But do you ever get intense dreams, like something you can't control, where you wake up in like a pool of sweat and you just feel like that it just scars you a little bit?
That's what the sleep paralysis sometimes does to me. The one I mentioned, which was the first with the bird, that was kind of mundane, but I had stuff where like I got suffocated, an entity sitting on top of me, and I'm not even like, I don't even believe in paranormal stuff, right?
That's how most
But
paranormal stories go, is someone sits on their chest. It feels like an elephant
right.
on their lungs.
Right. Yes. And it's actually, you have the feeling of suffocating, and then you can't move. There's nothing you can do. And then all of a sudden you break out of it. And then you're like, I woke up screaming from this and in sweat, and like totally, I didn't know what was going on. And yeah, I definitely had it. But in my case, it would typically be related to sleep paralysis. Now, I should mention that I also have dreams that frighten me. But the weird thing is, and that's something I really want to go into the literature a little bit, and I don't think there is a lot of literature, where I have the most plain dream ever. I am walking in a forest with my mother. Nothing's happening. We're having a good conversation. I wake up and I'm super emotional, but like frightful emotional. I'm in fear, and the dream was super mundane, and I don't know, my emotional system is going haywire, whereas the content of the dream was like super normal, and I don't understand that, and that is something which I definitely want to know more about.
Do you think it could be maybe something psychological, like you're holding on to something, your brain's trying to, because maybe your dream might be a way of your brain trying to reset after the day? Like, because there are some things you probably go to sleep after, like maybe in the, let's say the morning, somebody cut you off or you got a flat tire. Then by the time you get home, 8 hours later or whatever, you're not really worried about the flat tire anymore because you got it all handled, but your brain necessarily hasn't come to grips with the whole situation, how emotionally kind of aggression it was. Or do you think like people from the UFO Twitter community will say it's an alien projecting thoughts into your head, and then some people will say it's paranormal stuff? What do you think, like skeptic wise or from your own thoughts? What do you think that could possibly be?
Yeah, I'm going to give the most boring neuroscientific answer to that. But what I think is probably happening is that because we know sleep is important to store long-term memories, that there's a lot of research showing this over the last 50 years. That's I would say that's relatively known. There's not a lot known about the brain, but that sleep is important for storing long-term memories is quite known. And I think indeed what you say is that something happened that day that had kind of like an emotional value, and that during that dream, my brain is storing that emotional memory. And it doesn't even matter what the dream content is, but it's just storing that. And then when I wake up at that point, those regions which are important for emotional processing will still be very active. And that's why I feel so frightened at that point. Now, I should say, though, I should do more research on that because I don't know that for certain, but that would be my theory.
I can get down with that theory. What's your worst possible dream that you've ever had?
Worst possible dream that I've ever had. The worst possible dream that I've ever had wasn't necessarily bad because it was like the world was exploding or anything. It was just because it was so extremely realistic. I had a sleep paralysis, and I was lying in bed, and somebody walked into my apartment, and my apartment is not very big. It's like it has 2 rooms, a sleep room and a normal room, and and I was lying in bed, and there was a person, a guy probably, in my apartment, and I could hear it. I could hear it, and he was going to my toilet for some reason and just peeing. Now, you would say, okay, somebody's in your home. That's kind of scary, but he's peeing in your toilet.
You gotta go. You gotta go, man.
Right. But the fact that what I heard in this hallucination or dream was so realistic, and I couldn't do anything about it. It was just the realism of it was so extreme. It was like I didn't know I was because sometimes when you're in sleep paralysis, you kind of know, okay, here we go again, because I had it like 100 times. Okay, I'm not, this is all not real. I'm in sleep paralysis. It will go over. Just wake up. You will be fine. But sometimes it's so realistic that you think it's real, and you're like, fuck, man, there's somebody in my home. I need to call the police, and I cannot do anything. That was probably the most scary one, even though the story was not that spectacular.
Have you ever pulled a message out of one of your dreams that kind of still kind of rings with you today?
No.
Really?
Sorry.
I'm not even religious, but I met Jesus at a Taco Bell, and he said some shit that I was like thinking subconsciously. I was like, I've heard this somewhere before. Like, all that you have is all that you need, or it's actually easier than you think it is. Just these random like motivational poster quotes, but they were said in such a profound way, and it's Jesus saying it. So you're like, that's exactly what Jesus would say in this answer while we're eating a bean burrito or something like that. It's like those types of things. Like with the next day, I'm like, what the fuck was that about? Like I had one nightmare that I'm not even going to go into depth on because it's going to take forever to explain the whole thing, and you're going to think I'm a psychopath at the end of it. But it was so much where if I think about it, I'll start tearing up because it was that impactful, and it was like the detail of the situation. I mean, for instance, like the werewolf was created because you can't create new things like that, but you can mash up things that you've seen and create an image from it. So this guy had a dream, and he said it was probably mixing a bear with a wolf, and then these different things that he saw. Just like any person in your dream is some face that you've seen, because your body and your mind cannot create a new image like that, a new facial distinctive thing. It just takes bits and pieces and morphs them together, or it's from something you've seen. But like, for instance, what the hell is that? I don't know. Like, our minds are just like these things where it's like you're literally getting your own private movie when you go to sleep. And I think this is why people love to sleep a lot, because sometimes, like, whether they want to experience lucid dreaming, Doug Stanhope, a popular comedian, is a giant proprietor of lucid dreaming. He talks about these crazy experiences that help him, that he can bring back into reality as well too, where you start looking at these things of like, what is that thing that makes our brain fall into these different categories, that makes us so diverse, but also makes it so under, I don't know, we underestimate it, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's this entire idea that we think we're close with replicating the brain with artificial intelligence, and we're just not. I mean, I'm sorry to everybody who loves artificial intelligence, but we're not even close.
I have
But
a
coming
fear
back,
of it. I do. I have a huge fear of it. I don't think it's
yes,
going to
but
catch up to us, but the way that these algorithms are programmed, it's like they're in the basis of whoever created it. So your Facebook
yeah,
algorithm and your Instagram algorithm is a mini Mark Zuckerberg. And I just think it doesn't have that human thought that comes in. So this thing will
right,
just ban you for no apparent reason or show you the worst possible things.
right. But yeah, the step to real human thought, I agree. It's scary what they have already, but it's just a logarithmic scale. It's just so much more to it. But what I wanted to say is, yeah, I never got really like a message out of a dream. My dreams are weird. Like my dreams, well, they're not weird. Actually, the thing is, they're not weird, and that's why they're weird, because my dreams are often so realistic. I don't know if you ever heard of false awakening loops.
Yeah.
I have those quite a bit as well, and they seem to be related to lucid dreaming and sleep paralysis, where you wake up and you think you actually woke up, and you're looking on your phone, you're going to the bathroom, you set your coffee, and then all of a sudden you wake up again, and you're like, what? Wait, what? This was not real. This was a dream, and then you start to do your morning routine again, look on your phone again, and then again you wake up, and that happens like 5 times. And like my record is 5 times. I had it like 5 times in a row, and after the 5th time, I'm like, am I awake? Am I asleep? What the fuck is going on? I don't know what's happening here.
I've had a dream where I've got in my car to go to work, and then I woke up and I was like, that was a dream of me getting into my car and driving to work? It was so realistic, like I was awake. But then I've also had where I've fallen asleep and then woke up and I thought I was late for work, and I went to bed at like 5 p.m., but I woke up at 6 and I thought it was 6 a.m. because it was like getting dark, or it was getting to be light. I was like, I'm late for work. And then I would start getting ready, like, you fell asleep for like an hour. It was like, what? And it felt like a week, dude. It was just so long, where I'm like, maybe I've tricked my body into thinking that maybe the more amount of time I sleep, the longer it feels. Like maybe an hour feels like a week, or maybe a minute or 2 minutes feels like an hour or something like that, because it doesn't get that much sleep. So I hit that cycle so quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there is a lot of evidence that sleep indeed, like if you have if you don't have enough sleep, then your body tries to catch up by compacting the sleep stages. So that's actually a thing. So
like a sandwich.
Makes sense. Yes, absolutely. So it's not necessarily the greatest thing for you, but of course, like,
I'm only aiming for 26, dude. I don't need to live past that. Everything else is a lucky number.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the thing is, you probably don't try to not sleep on purpose, right? So it's like, because you said you're an insomniac, so you can't sleep because you just can't sleep.
I just don't feel it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like you would like, oh, I'm going to try to stay awake now for 10 days, which, by the way, is a very bad idea, because I think after 10 days, you're like,
your brain fucking shuts down. We saw that from Nightmare on Elm Street, where Freddy Krueger was like, I was waiting for you to stay up the whole time.
Absolutely. Yes. That's definitely not good for you.
Well, Miles, you've given me enough of your time, man. Is there a place where people can find your YouTube channel, if you want to let people know what that's about real quick, and then give them the links?
All right, cool. Yeah. So you can find us. It's all about, I'm doing it together with a colleague called Michael. It's the YouTube channel is called Psyched, with an exclamation mark. So Psyched with PSYCHED and an exclamation mark. Yeah, I don't know if you can share a link later or
yeah, I'm going to put it in the episode details.
Okay, cool. Because we're still a small channel, so even if you type it in, you probably have to scroll a bit before you actually find us. But yeah, that's where you can find me. Besides that, I'm on Twitter. I got a website, so just look for my name on Google and you will definitely find me. Everything I would probably post is related to neuroscience research. So, it's kind of a skeptical research-based stuff. So you wouldn't find something like, flat Earth theories or alien abduction stories. You wouldn't find that too much on our channel. But if you're just interested in how the brain works, then come to us and we will tell you.
I'll link it all in the description. And thanks for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for next episode.